So 3 years ago, squatters moved next door and basically made my life a living hell. Um, After they moved in, I was afraid to let my girls go outside and play, and so we basically stayed in. I was afraid to go to the gym and work out because I didn't want to leave my wife alone with these crazy people doing God knows what next door. And for 3 years, I felt like a prisoner. I didn't know what to do, or, you know, I'd call the police and they would scatter when they came, and it never seemed like anything could be done about it, and especially because I was a neighbor and I wasn't the owner of the house that the squatters were living in. They couldn't do anything for me.
I remember 3 years ago, I was outside with one of my friends, and we saw a car in front of my house, and in the car there was a girl being choked.
One of the biggest clouds hanging over the economy right now is that a rising number of homeowners quite simply can't pay their mortgages. Foreclosures have hit a record high.
Manhattan has the biggest income gap in America, and the rich are pricing the poor out of the housing market.
For the private real estate industry, there's no profit in building housing for people at the lowest end of the spectrum.
Who are you?
What are you doing?
Who are you?
What are you doing?
Do you have a valid lease for this place?
Yes, I do.
Can I see it?
Here you go.
The squatter had every excuse in the book as to why she couldn't produce a valid lease or key, but she sure knows the law.
The eviction has not been done yet. So once they go to court and you do those type of things, then that can happen.
Darrell Beatty, not just another struggling tenant in housing court. Beatty branded a squatter by the judge here, 3 weeks after being arrested on criminal charges in this case.
We're going to talk about the headlines about the young man who moved into a $2.5 million mansion near Miami without paying a dime. We first told you about this story Friday morning, but we're now learning that this has become a national trend, and some of the people doing it are even connected to an anti-government group the FBI classifies as domestic terrorists.
So basically, I was caught in a catch-22. I wasn't the homeowner, and the police couldn't help me. So after doing a ton of research online, I discovered an article by Newsday that covered the topic of zombie houses. So I figured maybe they could help me. I decided to go and see what they knew, and also talk to my county legislator to help me combat this problem. And after doing that research, I also found out that there was a coalition for the homeless that might have answers for me as well. So I decided to go and check it out.
A zombie home, and actually when we started this whole project, we didn't know what a zombie home was. We'd never heard the term. We actually were several months into it before we'd read an Associated Press story which used the term. And of course that became very popular to use. It's a very catchy phrase, zombie home. The way it's been defined for us and the way we've continued to define it is a home that's within the foreclosure process that has been abandoned by its owner and possibly falling into decay. we knew there was an issue on Long Island, but we didn't realize how extensive it was, and that Long Island was actually one of the worst areas in the state and in the country, even in terms of zombie homes.
When the mortgage crisis happened, it took about 2 years before we felt the effects of that in Nassau and Suffolk counties. Long Island actually, it took a little longer for it to get here. We thought we were going to survive it, and then starting around 2010, a lot of those bubbles started. Those mortgages started hitting, and we now actually in Suffolk County specifically have among the highest foreclosure rates in all of New York State. Nassau is not too far behind.
When I was doing the mortgage consulting and also acting as a mortgage counselor, the banks were acting responsibly. They were requiring that individuals came to the table with the proper assets, the proper work history, and that they were in fact qualified, that their credit qualified them to buy, to purchase. And so I believe the decline in their moral compass came afterwards. I did realize that there was an issue in terms of who they were allowing to purchase, and very, very easily when I started to hear from family members and friends, you know, that they were buying and knowing very well, you know, some of their personal, you know, backstories, I realized that people were getting into houses that were, in fact, very expensive, and that their means were meager in many ways, and that they, in fact, would not be able to maintain the homes.
Between that and 2010, which was the start of our downfall, and then Sandy hitting in 2012, we had a major issue that happened here. Some of the things that happened with respect to both was whenever any of those houses foreclosed, you know, a lot of people were told, oh, you could just get renters. They'll help cover some of your costs. So every time that one of those houses foreclosed, in many cases, the homeowners became homeless, and renters in those houses also became homeless. And something similar happened during Sandy. We had a lot of folks that had, in many cases, illegal apartments, but they were inexpensive. They were safe, and they were inexpensive. So folks on disability or on fixed incomes were living in many of those apartments, were able to afford those apartments, and homeowners were able to afford their mortgages because they had those tenants. When Sandy hit, and those houses had to be rebuilt, any that could be rebuilt could not be rebuilt with those apartments. So there were a lot of folks that lost their houses because they couldn't, after Sandy, they couldn't manage anyway. And then even after that, some of those that were rebuilt, the homeowners could no longer afford the mortgages without that additional income. So once again, 2 families became homeless in each of those houses that was lost.
Banks and mortgage companies, they were, I think, they express similar frustrations with the problem. I think in a lot of ways, they too feel frustrated. I think they have taken the brunt of the blame for homes that fall into decay. They are limited, though, in what they can do in some ways. If a homeowner is still involved, if the house is still in the foreclosure process, legally it's still on the homeowner to maintain the house. And banks, municipal workers, they're limited in terms of trespassing laws and what they can do on properties. Initially, it was about 4,000 between Nassau and Suffolk counties. About 3 months later, we did a follow-up story, and the number had grown even more. It was well into about 4,400 at that point. You know, I can't say right now what the current number is. You know, there's been a lot of measures taken to address zombie homes, so it could have gone down. But the problem with a lot of these homes is that they do linger in the foreclosure process for years. And so a home that was counted 2 years ago when we did the series might still be considered a zombie home today, and others may have fallen off and gotten out of the foreclosure process.
Well, the numbers are upward of like 5,000. They're extremely high, and there are certain areas that are impacted more than others. And in explaining what a legislator does, one of the major things that they do is to enact legislation, create legislation that will deal with zombie houses or anything that bubbles up as a way of a community issue. And so when I was first campaigning for this position, I walked the district as best as I could. It was in the month of February and there was tons of snow, but we got out there and we walked. And in walking, I quickly realized that one of the issues that we had was around abandoned homes, zombie houses. And so one of the first pieces of legislation that I put forward for consideration and filed with the clerk was for the purpose of creating a land bank. And the land bank they specifically would have a role to try and counteract the destruction of zombie houses here in Nassau County.
I think Long Island's a little late to the game in terms of seeing how these zombie homes are popping up, probably just because maybe homeowners were trying to keep up with payments for longer and trying to hold on to the homes. And so it took a while for homes to actually go into the foreclosure process, and then even longer for the houses to then become into a state of disrepair. New York is unique, and probably why New York has been hit so hard with this problem, in that there's a judicial process that comes with foreclosure. And the average when we initially reported was over 900 days it took for a foreclosure, which is close to 3 years. And then in subsequent months, it actually increased. It probably is on the decrease now because there's been some measures taken to lessen or speed up the process. But that's why in New York you have some homes, and the average is 3 years, mind you. So there are some homes that are caught up in this process for 5 or 7 years. And other places like Texas, for instance, they don't have that judicial process. So a foreclosure can take 30 to 60 days there. So that's why you see, and obviously the longer a home is in foreclosure, especially if the owner has vacated the house, the more likely it's going to fall into disrepair over time. One thing we found out personally and in talking with municipal leaders is that it's very difficult sometimes to locate who exactly is responsible for a home. You have a mortgage lender, you have a servicer, there's often a company that's hired to service a home. And some banks are merely trustees for a mortgage, and they're in charge of a whole group of loans. So it was very difficult to even figure out which bank was the proper bank to call on a particular home. And then when we did speak with them, they were sort of hesitant. Again, I think there's a lot of legal issues that they face with these houses, and I think they knew too that they'd kind of been demonized a little bit in the press regarding the whole issue, especially with the housing crisis and predatory mortgages and things like that. So I think they were definitely a little gun shy to speak to us, and then very, very hesitant to get into specific cases that we were bringing up to them.
I think it's generally a problem happening throughout the U.S., and it was birthed out of the bank's decisions to start lending money to individuals who didn't technically qualify for either a mortgage period or for the size mortgage that they received, for the amount of money they received. So I believe that it was, it's birthed out of the bank's inability to really screen families properly and to make sure that we had qualified home buyers. People in record numbers quickly were unable to maintain their mortgages, and so therefore in many cases what you see is that people vacate, they leave. There's again a small, I would say, fraction of of those homes become vacant due to deaths and things of that nature, or even natural disasters. We have in Freeport a large number of homes that have become part of the zombie, house category by way of the destruction of Sandy. I don't think that the influx of immigrants really directly impacted people's abilities to maintain their homes. Potentially, we have individuals who are immigrants or those that are homeless that are just squatting in those homes.
So yes, we have encountered squatters and folks that are in housing illegally. The vast majority, however, that are actually utilizing abandoned homes are not homeless folks. They're in there for reasons other than just needing a place to stay. Whenever there have been situations, we do an annual homeless count in January of each year. And in our experience, the only time that we've actually found anybody in a home, one of those homes that is there because they didn't have anywhere else to go, they tended to be folks that were not eligible for any services in the community because of resident status or lack of resident status. And they tended not to really be interested in assistance, probably because of fear of what the consequences of seeking assistance might be. But again, the vast majority that we have encountered were not there because they were homeless.
Okay, after talking to Greta from the Long Island Coalition of the Homeless, I had to see this thing from another viewpoint. I just realized that homeless people weren't moving to these houses, criminals were. I had to talk to someone either in law enforcement or a lawyer or somebody who can give me another angle to this story. I mean, something's got to be done.
Squatters' rights, it was interesting. Until I started speaking with people whose homes had been taken over by squatters, I hadn't realized the extent of the problem. Basically, a squatter or someone who is living in a residence for 30 days or more has certain rights under the law. And in order to get them removed, there has to be an eviction process in the courts, which can take 6 months or longer to happen.
Well, when I was on patrol, once in a while we'd run into jobs where we had to deal with squatters, and most of them weren't like what they experienced like in the Midwest, where people move into vacant houses. A lot of them were family members that they lived with someone else. That person's deceased, and now the house goes into like probate. And when they try to sell the house, they can't because the other family member's squatting in the house. So they'd have to take them to a landlord-tenant court to get them evicted.
I think people didn't think something like squatters could happen in Nassau and Suffolk. I think, people living in Levittown, the first suburb, were shocked to have dozens and dozens of these homes, sometimes in one neighborhood. But squatters' rights are essentially what was put in place to protect anyone who rents a property from a landlord. 30 years ago, there weren't these protections in place, and landlords, if they felt like it could just kick someone out on the street, they could cut off utilities to try to force them to leave their property. So these laws were put in as protections for renters, unfortunately now have been taken advantage of in some cases by squatters.
One time I had a job, which was really interesting, was a woman called us. I felt so bad for her because she was estranged from her son. He was living in a basement apartment, and they had some conflicts, and finally he moved out of the basement apartment. So it's bad enough that she had to deal with that. When she went down there to clean it out, she noticed there was another individual living in the basement. And it turns out that it was a friend of her son that was living with the son. And you would think that he would leave when his friend left. He didn't, and he stayed in the house. And she called us for help. And when I went quiet about it, she said that he was probably there for a few months, which over 30 days he has squatters' rights, and I had to inform her that she had to go to landlord-tenant court and get counsel to remove this person from a premise, and it was tough.
One of the houses that I had listed, I make a point of opening up all my own listings. I don't put lock boxes on because I like to keep track of what goes on. I went to show one of my listings. I open up the door and I see food on the counter, and of course it's a vacant house. Nobody's supposed to have food on the counter. I walk in and this person walks out of one of the rooms, wants to know what I'm doing there. I want to know what he's doing there. He claimed that he rented the house. That was his reason for being there. He said, "Oh, I rented this house."
So what happened then? Did you end up calling the police?
I did. I called the police, and I called my broker right away, let her know what was happening, and I walked outside until the police came. And thank God, nothing serious happened. But I walked out until the police came.
And how long did it take for you to get that squatter out of the house before you can sell it?
The homeowner was able to work something out with the squatter, and that went well. Most of them don't go well, but thank God that one did go well.
And one of the problems that we've had as an agency is that when we put pictures of homes on all the internet sites, people can tell which ones are the ones that are vacant. So what they have done a number of times with us is they have taken our photographs and they have taken the homes and put them up for rent and tried to actually rent properties that we were selling that were owned by our homeowners, and tried to get people to send them, sign leases, send them money, and that's a problem that we've had in the past.
Squatting is not a crime itself. If the person, if the individual was seen breaking into the premise, then that's a crime, and they'll be arrested for criminal trespass or maybe burglary. But often what happens is no one could attribute the squatters for the break-in. There's no proof that they actually broke into the premise. What happens is people will call the police and say, "Listen, I've seen people going in and out of this house," and when we'll come down to the location and we'll interview the individuals, if they say, "Oh well, you know, I've been here. It was open. I walked in 3 months ago, and because I have nowhere else to live," and if they say over 30 days and they can prove it, most of the times what a lot of these individuals do that are very good at it, the minute they get into the premise, they get mail sent to them at that location, so they can prove, "Here's my mail. I've been here for 3-4 months now." Then there's nothing we can do about it as the police. It's got to be the owner of the premise has to go to landlord-tenant court to have them removed.
It came to light that there was at least one family, possibly two families, that were actually moving between various houses that were zombie houses, that were vacant houses. And things had escalated to the point where they were actually harassing residents who were trying to document their comings and goings and things like that. And the squatters were threatening to call the police on residents.
There's a lot of instances. That's why we tell people to be very careful about some of these sites that they go on looking for rentals. Because a lot of them are really vacant homes that are for sale, that somebody puts up as a rental, and then they take these people's money and walk away, and the tenants think, "Oh, how nice, I have a beautiful home," when really they don't.
And one of the ways we tell people, and we warn people about that, especially people who call up with rentals, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So if houses are renting between $2,000 and $2,500 a month, and you come across one and it's $1,200, and they allow pets, and they're missionaries who are going off for a year, and all they really care about is good people to put in there, and if it looks, and dogs are allowed, you can have your dogs. Like, if that is not the norm in your neighborhood, then be very cautious and wary of that, because they're very good with writing things that people on the internet will think they have, wow, they found the needle in the haystack, you know, and because it sounds so good, they're so anxious to because they found something that will let us bring the dogs, and we can afford it, and we have really nice people, landlords who are going to be out of the country, and they're not going to bother us, and look at this beautiful house.
Well, the houses that the foreclosures on Long Island specifically, I know individuals are retired police officers, and they have jobs. They work for the bank, where every day they'll get a list of locations, and what they have to do is go to that location and inspect the locks to make sure the premise is still locked, and that there's nobody squatting at the location. And what that does also is, when the police get a call that there's someone in the premise, and they try to say they're there 30 days, the bank could say, no, our agent has been there yesterday, and the locks were secured, and there was nobody in there. So that's what gives them the, so they can't get the squatting rights.
So basically, after 3 years of complaining and research and trying to get people to understand what was going on, they boarded up the house next door after 3 years. Just tell me who you are and what you do.
My name's Andrew Strauch, and I maintain foreclosed homes for the banks.
Okay. And what happened with this home here?
This home, the bank took it over, and squatters moved in, and we had the police escort them out, and then we boarded the whole home up.
Okay. And so what was like the process exactly?
Well, we get a work order to see if the property is occupied or not, and it all depends how far along in the foreclosure process the property's in.
Okay.
Once it gets to a certain part in litigation, the home gets taken over by the bank.
Okay. And do you do this for one bank or different kinds of banks?
Multiple banks.
Multiple banks, okay. And I just did a story about all the houses on Long Island. So how many
zombie homes?
Yeah, so how many homes have you done this year?
This year, hundreds.
Hundreds?
Hundreds.
Wow.
I have crews that cover all of New York and Massachusetts. What we do is we maintain the homes. We cut the grass, change the locks, board them up, winterize them to preserve the pipes, and whatever else is needed to fight the blight. Like, for example, all this overgrowth, we put in a bid, and hopefully the bid comes back, and we'll trim it and chop it up so it looks like someone's still living in the home.
Wow. So this is very lucrative for you right now.
I can't complain.
All right, cool. And your name of the company is?
AS Preservation.
I couldn't figure out how these squatters were allowed to stay in the house. And literally after walking out of my house one day, the answer blew onto my lawn. It was a notice for adverse possession. I had no idea what adverse possession was, so I decided to visit my roommate Gary, who was a lawyer, to find out.
Flower Mound's Waterford Drive is lined with well-manicured $300,000 homes. So when a new neighbor moved in without the usual sale, mortgage-paying homeowners had a few questions.
What paperwork is it, and how is it legally binding if he doesn't legally own the house? He just squats there.
Lee Lowry and her husband told me the house down the street was in foreclosure for more than a year. The owner walked away, then the mortgage company went out of business. Apparently, that opened the door for someone to take advantage of the situation. Kenneth Robinson told us he's no squatter. He says he moved in on June 17th after months of research about a Texas law called adverse possession.
This is not a normal process, but it's not a process that's not known. It's just not known to everybody.
Robinson says this piece of paper gives him rights to the house. It's an online form he printed out and filed at the Denton County Courthouse for $16. It says the house was abandoned and he's claiming ownership.
I went through, looked at it, and added some things here, you know what I mean, for my own protection.
The house is virtually empty, just a few pieces of furniture, no running water or electricity. But Robinson says just by setting up camp in the living room, Texas law gives him exclusive negotiating rights with the original owner. If the owner wants him out, he would have to pay off his massive mortgage debt, and the bank would have to file a complicated lawsuit. Robinson believes neither is likely, so if he stays in the house, after 3 years, he can ask the court for the title. That's your goal eventually, is to have title of this home, to be the owner of this home?
Absolutely.
And
on a record, you know what I mean? At this point, you know, since I possess it, I am the owner of the home.
Robinson posted no trespassing signs after neighbors asked police to arrest him for breaking in. But Flower Mound officers say they can't remove him from the property because home ownership is a civil matter, not criminal. Lowry and her neighbors continue to look for legal ways to get him out.
Or if he wants the house, buy the house like everyone else had to. Get the money, buy the house.
Robinson says he's not buying anything. As far as he's concerned, the $330,000 home is already his.
Adverse possession is a doctrine that basically allows a trespasser to eventually become an owner of a property, land. Adverse possession is a doctrine that basically allows a trespasser to eventually become an owner of a property, land or house, or even goods. It has different prongs that have to be met in order for an adverse possessor to actually gain possession and title to a house. Those prongs are the possession has to be hostile, which means hostile to the actual owner's interest. Has to be open and notorious, which means they actually have to be using the property, and it has to be clear that they're using it, not like a hidden purpose. It has to be exclusive, which means that they're the only ones using that property. And it also has to basically be continuous for a period of time. In New York, for example, and it varies by state, adverse possession takes 10 years, which means for 10 years uninterrupted possession with all those other prongs met, you can actually own the property.
Adverse possession.
People try to use it.
They try to use it. Like we had a problem last week in Hempstead with the guy said he was from a sovereign nation, so he thought he was able to take it over.
I heard, but that's crazy.
So he's done it multiple times, and he was locked up twice at the home.
Wow.
So.
It's actually an outdated doctrine. The actual back to ancient Roman law was eventually adopted by England and was cultivated and sort of built up and developed over the course of a couple hundred years from the 1620s to the 1800s. And eventually the United States based their adverse possession laws on the English laws as they were developed. It really isn't outdated. This goes back to when records were hard to keep, boundaries weren't exact, title wasn't clear. Today, you wouldn't see it as often, and it's really outdated because with computerization, with satellites, GPS, all these different technologies and records that are kept in the local counties and cities and states, you can tell easily the boundaries of properties. You can tell title owners. It's a lot easier to deal with those than it was hundreds of years ago. So really, it's an outdated concept that just still hangs around and still can take effect because people do not realize what's involved. Squatters you find more often in like houses, apartments, living areas where people live. Generally, it's an abandoned property where a squatter will go in, will actually use it. It doesn't even make it seem like it's theirs. Sometimes they'll even have utilities put in their name, and they stay there, and a lot of times even take care of the property. But it's usually done in a way to kind of hide it from the actual owner, if there is one. But generally an owner isn't around, and that's why the squatters can get in there. Squatters can also take the form of, an example would be in a rooming house that rents out rooms for short terms. A person can take occupancy, for what should be a 10 or 20 day period, decide not to leave. During, what a lot of people know is during that a 30-day period in New York, you can use your what's called self-help, lock them out, to get them out with police or otherwise. Once 30 days passes, an uninterrupted 30 days, then they have the right to stay there. And it becomes much more difficult. You can still get them out, but it's much more difficult.
Just that the process has to be followed through in the court system in order to have them removed from the premise. And it also gets kind of sticky too because they have like the same rights as like a renter. You can't turn off the utilities, and you can't forcibly remove them from the premise. And as a police officer, it was frustrating because many times people would call us for assistance, and then they'd look at us dumbfounded when we were trying to explain to them there was nothing we could do to get these people removed from their houses.
Unfortunately, it's extremely difficult, and the reason being is that a person who is not the actual owner of the property where the squatters are staying, you don't really have what's called standing to take action because you don't own the property. if the people are causing issues, nuisance, noise, violating ordinances, laws, and so on, for other reasons, you know, you may be able to take action. You know, you can call the police, you can have them come, maybe give them a citation, whatever have you. But in order for them to be removed, you actually would need the owner of the property to take action, which would mean trying to track down an owner, because usually when there's a squatter, the property's abandoned or just an owner who's just not around, whether they live somewhere else and this is just a property they happen to own. You'd really have to track down the owner. Any citizen, even a neighbor, doesn't really have rights to kick them out, and should not attempt to either, because when a squatter, an adverse possessor, any of these people meet their time frames and they actually have rights, you can actually have a problem, a legal problem, and they could sue you if you try to do something like lock them out, which is why you wind up having to go to court for squatters after a certain amount of time, or a holdover tenant in that situation.
But with the house and squatting, this is probably comes from laws a long time ago, where people looking for shelter find a vacant building and stay in there to stay warm and get shelter. And you know, the government, the society itself is very sensitive when it comes to removing people and putting them out on the street, especially in a city like New York, where the laws are very strict when it comes to homeless. For instance, a homeless family in New York City, they go to a homeless shelter. If they can't supply them shelter, the city has to put them up into a hotel and pay for it.
So taking a perfect example, I had a case many years ago where we had a situation where there was a sort of a rooming house. It wasn't quite a hotel, but it was similar, but it was a nonprofit, and they would rent out rooms for short term. They had someone who came in, didn't want to leave, so what we advised them to do is, after it was already 26 days, so 4 more days and it would have been much more difficult to get them out. They weren't able to lock them out because the person wouldn't leave. So what we did is had them offer this person a better, different accommodation within the same building. And that person said, well, okay, sure, I'll take a better. By having to get out prior to 30 days, it started the clock over, back to 0. So we had 30 days, in which time we rushed into court and were able to have the court give us a warrant to have him kicked out.
See, most of the time, like you said, with the guys producing paperwork, when you call the police and you say, listen, there's a guy in the house is vacant, and the police respond, the patrolmen, they're not trained, they're not very astute into the legal matters of what a document looks like, and they don't have the time to try to work it out. They're going to refer you to civil court because it's a civil matter, unless it's a possible burglary. They're going to refer you to the civil matters, which is landlord-tenant court. And it's the easiest way, you know, to move along when you're on patrol. But it's very frustrating for the individual that's trying to get some satisfaction. And I think most of the time it's how you articulate it also. When, like I said, you get a premise that was vacant yesterday, and you call the police. Now, when the police come, if you're the neighbor, it's like in Mike's case, Mike goes over there, and now the guy comes out and he's telling the police officer, oh no, officer, I've been here for like 3 or 4 months. I live here. My friend let me stay here. Now, if the neighbor says, officer, I called you, that place was locked, there's nobody living in it. Now, based on Mike's information, the officer could say, no, I believe the neighbor, and I'm going to take you in for criminal trespass. You know, but they have to have some type of proof or basis to believe that this guy isn't here 30 days. And like you said, they you know, there's some people that are very good at this, and they'll get the documentation and they'll be able to, you know, to throw a little confusion into the matter.
Jennifer Marin is part of the Alliance of Women Film Journalists and writes the Cinema Citizens blog. She reviewed and interviewed for New York Press, About.com, Women's E-News, and for USA Today. She is also a Tisch SOA graduate and has acted off-Broadway in regional theater and Tokyo, where she was a member of the famed Tenjo Sajiki Theater Company. She had spent half of her time living in Manhattan and the other half in Laurelton, located in Queens, New York. She had dreams of retiring and spending her golden years in her childhood home. All of that came to an end when she received a utility bill that seemed a bit off.
I'm Jennifer Marin. I'm a journalist and a victim. Well, I didn't find out about it actually until May, but in February, my family home in Laurelton, Queens was broken into, and everything was stolen, and squatters moved in and took possession of the house and began living there. And everything in my family legacy was suddenly disappeared. In May of 2014, I got a water bill from the city for the property, and the water consumption was double what it should have been. And I called the city water department to ask why the bill was so high, and they said, well, there's usage in the house. And I said, that's not possible. There's nobody in the house at the moment. And they said, yeah, and there is, because they showed me on a chart that you can access online that there had been use. In other words, water was being turned on and turned off. If there'd been a leak, the consumption would have been flat. And there were peaks and valleys in the consumption, which indicated use and non-use. So I said, well, how could that be? And they said, well, maybe you have squatters. And I called the police, and I told them the address, and I said, I've been told by the water company there may be squatters because there should be no water usage at this point, and there is. And they showed me online, and they said, we'll go and take a look. So I called, this is the 20th precinct, I called the 20th precinct, and they went out. The 20th precinct went out, and they called me back, and they said, do you have tenants? And I said, absolutely not. I said, whoever's in the house, arrest them. They're there illegally. They've broken in. And they said, well, we can't do anything. For one thing, you're just a voice on the phone. And for another, they have papers showing that they belong there. Come out to the house itself and call 911 from the house. And call for a police car and say that there has been a break-in in your property. And I did that the following day. But the police, when they came, first of all, there was a dog barking very aggressively in the house, which meant that they had to call animal welfare in order to enter the house. And then they said that there wasn't anybody home and that there wasn't anything that they could do because they were law enforcement and they were not able to determine who was the actual occupant of the house. Then I went around to the back of the house because there was a car that kept going back and forth, and I thought, this is somebody. I had looked up in the meantime overnight. I'd looked up the names. I'd found that there was a fake deed that had been registered. I looked up the names, and I looked for any information I could on those names, and just began investigating myself what was going on. And I found somebody who looked like the person who was driving back and forth in the car and not stopping. And so I drove around to the back of the house thinking that perhaps they would get out of the car and go into the house and I could get them that way. And I asked a neighbor 2 doors down if he saw anybody in the house to just give me a call on my cell, that I was sitting in a car nearby. And I drove around to the back where I discovered that the garage had been broken into and that my car was missing as well as all of this other stuff. So I called the police about the car, and 2 police officers came, and they took a report on the car being stolen. And they also, at that point, actually approached the house through the rear garden, and a young man came out of the house. Turned out to be Deshaun Beatty, who's Darrell Beatty's son. who, you know, gave the police a whole song and dance about how their aunt had given them the house and this, that, and the other thing, and where does your father, who owns the house now, his father does, where's your father? He's not here. Where does he live? I don't know. I mean, and the police officer wound up saying to Deshaun Beatty, boy, you're playing a good game here, son. You know, this is, you know, but they couldn't do anything. There's nothing that they could do. So they left with giving me a police report on my stolen car, and that began the whole process. I began investigating and looking at and trying to find whatever I could to get my house back. I did the investigation, and I got sufficient information. For one thing, I was able to point out that on the fake deed, the address that was given for the seller of the deed, and neither name, Darrell Beatty, nor the seller's name, someone named Edith Moore, neither of those two people had anything whatsoever to do with my family. There was no title to the home in their names, either one of them. They had no proof of anything, any connection to the property whatsoever. Plus the fact that the address given for Edith Moore on the phony registration, the phony deed, doesn't even exist physically. And it was registered without any question, anything at all, just boom, bang, now you're the owner. It's been a while. I find it rather difficult to come here because it's emotionally extremely still tender for me. So, and I'm afraid, I'm just afraid now in the house. That's weird. I'm a senior citizen, and let's put it this way, I was fairly sure that I would be able to take care of myself. My plan was to move back to that house when I couldn't take care of myself and have somebody, pay someone to come and live with me, or invite someone in equally, aged condition to share the expense of having somebody come and live with us and take care of us in that house. And it was all set up for that. And that's not there anymore. Plus my savings are depleted. So I, as a senior citizen whose income possibilities have really diminished, face a future that is not as clear to me as it was before this happened. And I've been paying into this system for all my life. I mean, I've been a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen for all my life. And I don't, with the refusal to give me any victim compensation, the city is refusing to accept accountability for the registration of a fraudulent deed at all. They just say, well, what we're responsible for is taking the paper, stamping it, and collecting the fee, and that's it. But that undermines the ownership of everybody who has a deed. It undermines the value of a deed as an instrument that indicates ownership of a property. It means that everybody's property who owns property in this city is vulnerable to the instant loss of that property by the registration of a fraudulent deed. They did change their practices based on what happened to me, and they have an alert system where they warn you. You sign up for it, and they warn you online if there's been some change or effort made to change your deed or the status of your property. However, at the same time, if you look at their website, there's a disclaimer saying that they may not reach you, they may not find you. So, I mean, they put that there. And they claim that they are more vigilant now about the registration of fraudulent deeds, but they're not willing to release any kind of figures, and they say that they don't keep statistics on this matter to be able to prove that that's happened. And my understanding is that it is still going on. And I don't have any statistics and I can't cite specific cases, but occasionally in the news you'll see it, and you'll see there have been other people who've actually contacted my lawyers at this point because they're involved with cases where fraudulent deeds have been registered. Important to me, papers, documents, taxes, you know, things that were important to my life, records. Now I don't have them anymore because they've all been destroyed and thrown away. And this sign, once before I'd actually come out here and I found this sign on the front lawn, and I called the district attorney immediately to report it because somebody obviously was claiming that they owned the house and was going to sell it. They didn't own it, they had no claim to it. So this was something that happened during this whole thing. I got called by somebody, I don't know how the man found me, but I got called on my phone by someone who identified himself as Nir Cohen, Nircohen, who said that he had just bought my house or put a down payment on my house for $10,000 and that he'd been scammed. Darrell Beatty, he was sentenced on September the 9th of last year to 1 year in jail, according to his plea bargain.
We've been telling you about this deed scam for weeks. A judge today telling the squatter time is running out fast. CBS 2's Steve Langford first brought us the story, has more tonight from Queens Housing Court.
Darrell Beatty, not just another struggling tenant in housing court. Beatty branded a squatter by the judge here 3 weeks after being arrested on criminal charges in this case for allegedly laying false claim to this Laurelton home, where CBS 2 found Beatty in mid-October.
Are you squatting? No, I'm not.
Jennifer Marin, whose family has owned the home since the 1930s, has been fighting to throw Beatty out for months, and now the housing court judge has rejected his request to stay till the end of the year, giving Beatty 10 days now to get out.
This is something that I have called estate rape.
Marin actually forced to prove she owns the home after another deed filed with the city with Darrell Beatty's name on it claimed Beatty owns the place, where if he's paying any rent or making mortgage payments, the home's owner isn't getting any of it.
At one point, the housing court judge actually said to the homeowner's attorney, there's not going to be any payment. He's a squatter.
It does seem a little absurd.
The homeowner's attorney, who's seen many things in housing court, says Beatty will have to leave when the marshal comes to the door.
He could be, yes, in handcuffs again. I mean, that's what the marshal does.
Mr. Beatty, are you going to move out in 10 days?
Mr. Beatty, where are you going to move to? Beatty answering no questions as the real homeowner yearns for justice.
Oh, I hope he gets put away. He deserves it.
Darrell Beatty due in criminal court on this matter November 25th. In Laurelton, Queens, Steve Langford, CBS 2 News.
Darrell Beatty is also charged in another case in Queens for alleged false impersonation after being pulled over by a police officer.
This is a crime that, all told, with the theft of the house and everything in it, it comes to $1 million approximately. It's a large economic crime. He was sentenced by plea bargain to 1 year in jail. 1 year in jail in exchange for $1 million. Are there a lot of people who would choose that option? I think that there are. There are a lot of people who are in very big financial difficulties, who have families and everything else and would like to be law-abiding citizens, but if they were given a chance to spend 1 year in jail in exchange for $1 million, I think that a lot of people would be tempted to do that. And I think it's really encouraging people to be criminals. I think it underscores the message crime pays. And as a victim, you have no compensation. The state offers $500 in compensation, maximum to victims of crime, maximum of $500. And I applied for that with the encouragement of the district attorney, and I was denied it. They refused my claim, and I absolutely, I actually asked for a hearing on it. I challenged it. I had my hearing on it, and I just got a letter saying that they deny my claim. Again, and there's no place I can go about it. Why is it? Because it was my second home, and nothing in it they deemed to be essential. The refrigerator was not essential. My car wasn't essential. Yeah, he's not responsible for the property damage because they can't prove that he did it. They knew that he was living there. They can see what the property damage is, but they don't know that he did it. And this is the master bedroom. They splashed bleach in here as well. They had, again, there was a beautiful fixture there. This bed was not ours. There were two beds that were twin beds that were my grandfather and grandma's beds that had been here, you know.
Is this safe for us?
This is safe, and look what they did to it. And try and move this safe. You'll see how heavy it is. Look at in the back. In the back here. They cut it going like this. And look at how thick that is. Everything in it was stolen. The furniture was all removed. There's a cedar chest over there as well. And there's one piece of furniture that was here that was left. It's a kind of an armoire that's very antique, and I'd like to sell it. I have no place now to have it really. I'd like to sell it and recuperate some of the money because getting the house back meant that I had to deplete my savings, and I'm a senior citizen, and how am I going to replace that, and what am I supposed to live on? What am I supposed to live with? I want to take care of myself. My plan was to move back here with the house as it was, and have maybe another person come and live with me, and share the expenses of having somebody who would come and take care of us. But that possibility just doesn't exist anymore as things are now. The bathroom here, yeah, I don't know, the things that, this broken tile and stuff like that, and they took out the draining pipe and the shower head in the bath, in the shower. This, I mean, don't even dream of opening the refrigerator. I'm serious, it was like, oh my God. Yeah, the lights are working. So,
be careful.
Yeah, I will. You be careful. You can see it's a finished basement now. Actually, a church group came and helped me. A lot of the things that were downstairs, that are upstairs, were stuffed down here. You can see it was finished, and obviously ripped apart. They completely destroyed the heating and hot water units so that they do not work at all. This sink has been dislodged. And all of this is just ruined. I mean, this is not how it was. Well, I called and I said, first of all, I called lawyers because it was clear to me that there were legal issues involved and I needed to have representation. I found out very quickly from the police that the only way that I could get this man evicted was by going to court and evicting him, having him evicted. And I found out from the lawyers that the only way I could get the deed back in my name was to sue him in Supreme Court and get his false deed set aside and my own deed reinstated, both of which were very costly propositions. So I knew that there was a criminal act involved, and there was a lot of criminality involved. My things had been stolen, and my house had been stolen. God, I love this house. Yeah, I really love this house. Everything, I mean, none of this was like this. It was beautifully furnished and yeah.
Six months later, to add insult to injury, Jennifer Marin finds out that the man who stole her house, Darrell Beatty, is set to get out of jail early. It's a slap in the face to the woman who had lost almost everything. She goes to court to plead her case.
All right, well, this is different. This is a little different. We need to do
So can you just explain that to me one more time about what happened today?
Well, it's a very general question. Essentially, he gets credit for his good time. And on a year, on a definite sentence, he does 8 months, and that's what happened. That's what's going on. And the court doesn't have jurisdiction to take that away. It's strictly predicated on how he does his time. If he does his time without any infractions, he gets 4 months of good time credit on a year.
So he's due to get out at the end of this month?
That's my understanding.
He lived in my house for more time. For more time he lived in my house illegally than he will have served in jail if he gets out in April. What kind of justice is that?
So I guess I still don't understand why we were here today. Like,
and neither do I.
Explain to me. So
I can't.
What did an order say? Like, why was he produced? I mean, there had to be a reason why he was produced.
I cannot explain it.
To be fair, Let's look at the other side of the problem. For many people, the word squatter conjures up the image of people breaking the law and living for free on a property they don't own. Let's look at the other side of the coin. There are people in New York, as well as in the tri-state area, eking out an alternative lifestyle in someone else's home or abandoned building. Early in her life, while attending the School of Visual Arts, scream queen and artist Tina Kraus lived in an abandoned building just to get by. At the time, she didn't make enough money to go to school, eat, and pay rent. She, along with the other people who lived in this abandoned building, didn't feel like freeloaders. Instead, they were using something that was going to waste.
Hi, I'm Tina Kraus. I am an actress. I guess you could call it B-horror actress for the lack of a better term, huh? I also work in the film industry, production design, set design, props, and I also actually, wow, I guess you could say, fourth and foremost, an artist. If you graduate SBA, that makes you an artist now. Yep, that's what I do. All right, way back when, and I guess you could say my youth, was considered, and this was actually said in the court, a glorified squatter. Glorified, by the way, just mark those. Actually, how that started was I was going to SVA, and back then college is a lot of money, and my parents weren't paying for it, and I was working, but I was also trying to finish my other college and get my associates so that I didn't have to spend that much money in SVA. It's really expensive. And at that time, the only job that I could really get because of experience and stuff was just basically a waitress job, you know, it doesn't pay much. Every once in a while I would bartend in a place, but like, again, you know, you're talking an astronomical bill plus supplies plus a lot of things. I tried living at home for a while and that didn't work out. Fumes, up too late, trying to get projects done, you know, school's unforgiving, very unforgiving. I teach you about life, tell you that. So I moved out and I was looking to move into the city, you know, not to be too far from my school because it was like really a lot of hours and I was up really, really early and I wasn't leaving till like 2, 3 in the morning. In shop classes and stuff, and finals and all that other good stuff. So I looked around in the city and that was ridiculous. That wasn't happening. And then I looked in Brooklyn. Actually, this is how long ago it was. I looked in Williamsburg on Bedford Avenue, North 7th, warehouse over there. Huge loft. Me and my friends were gonna split it together and become artists, real artists, right? And as soon as we got off the train and headed off there, I looked around and thought, there is no way in hell I'm moving here. There were people looting people in broad daylight and just gunshots went off. And I was like, back on the L, and that was the end of that. And then a friend of mine who is an artist said, hey, listen, there's a building. I don't know what you want to do, but you can't live there. And I was like, so what the hell are you telling me about it for? He's like, that's all I'm going to say, but you have to see it. Across the street, there was a set design place, Arcadia Scenic, and they used to do stuff for the Ricky Lake Show and all that other stuff. And they used to throw out all the props after done. So there were staircases that would go out there. There were weird clown things. I found these 2 large podiums, and then I found somebody threw out a tub. So I was like, huh. So because the tub wasn't a foot tub, which, oh God, I wish it was, I would have took it here. It was just one of those shitty metal tubs that were in like some apartment, just they bulldozed something, and, you know, that just happened to be out there. I was like, well, it's got to come off the ground if we got to drain it, right? Drain the water. So I would put it on these clown pedestals, and we have a shower and a tub off the ground. And that was my tub, and that tub was in the hallway of my apartment. I did not have any doors. Privacy, the only privacy you got was the shower curtain was solid, that was it, because that was all you were getting. People walking in and out of the space, you take a shower.
Where did you get the water from?
Okay, so my sister's boyfriend was a plumber. And remember when I said I walked into the building and I said I want to see if there's running water? And I wanted to see how far and how many floors had. So I noticed that all of the floors had, you know, all the bathrooms and all of them ran, and they were on, so there had to be a water line to connect to. I asked him, he said, dude, tell me what you see. I told him what I saw. He said, I'll come down and, you know, he didn't charge me hardly anything for it because it was my sister's boyfriend. It was only supplies and stuff, not the labor. And he put in the piping for the shower. Yeah.
And where did the water drain out to?
I don't know, I didn't do the piping. I'm being honest, nobody was complaining, right? So I'm assuming it went where we're supposed to go. So what happened was like I said, more and more people, more and more artists moved in, and it started to get this reputation of becoming an art building. So then everybody was like, oh, the arts building on 111. So they were like, oh, there must be art studios. Of course, there was no, we made that up. But we started doing art studio tours, and it went on for years. And that gave leverage to, well, you're occupying the building. They had people that would come through to do inspections now to see if anybody was living there. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You had to dirty your place up. You had to hide everything, get rid of anything, and I mean anything that even indicated somebody had a coffee maker and they were like, you're living here. Yeah. You really had to make it look like, I mean, we knew when inspections were coming because somebody worked at City Hall would tell us. So it was just like, listen, you know, within this month, get your spaces looking like shit. Yeah, for real. Because like anybody that gets caught, the marshal will come in and that's it. So we were like, oh shit. Plus they wanted to know like you weren't supposed to come in and out of the building at a certain time, you know, but fucking was that. There was a guard, they had put in a guard shack for this very purpose, to make sure that you were not coming and going, you know, you left the building at like a decent hour and didn't come back until like the next day, didn't stay there.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. So what we did was we had a couple of people that were in the building. A lot of them were not from the United States, not born here. Yeah, immigrants that were artists and stuff, and really good ones, but they just couldn't get, you know, the work was sporadic and stuff like that, but they were handy. A lot of people were handy. So you would go downstairs, hey, how do you hook up a makeshift blah, blah, blah? Oh, you do this, do that. You had so many different people in that building because you have to remember, you had film people, you had carpenters, you had, you know, people who were just mechanics, you had whoever it was, whoever decided, oh, I could build the space out of it. Doesn't cost me, you know, blah and this and that, and who's gonna know, you know what I mean? It's like, it was like that kind of a thing. And then there was a community bar in the building. Well, the one guy, he turned his space into a community bar, and he kept it open. Yeah, called it the after hours. It was the place was so crazy. There was like DJs that would come down and just they had like a rave area. Yeah, it was like, and that's how we would enter the building from the back or the side, like freaking roaches, you know, so no one can see us, you know, and get a key for something and just like try to, you know, manipulate. One guy was a locksmith, so he went around to the different areas that were locked, and he would go and had the form of the key and would make the keys. You know, it's, oh wow, it's mixed. Coming from someone who lost their space and did a lot of work, and that space was beautiful. When I was done with it, you would not believe you could see a reflection in the floor. I did beautiful things to it. So yeah, to see all that go to waste, you know what I mean? Because somebody is like, screw you, you really want to give them the bird and other things. But here's the bottom line, it's not our building. All right, it isn't, and you got to know that going in. You need, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard life. It's hard to make a living. It's hard to pay bills. It's hard to pay school. It's hard to eat. You know, that was there for us and gave us the grace that it gave us when we had it. You know, I think. I think maybe there should be a law for owners not to let their buildings go to shit, especially beautiful historical pieces of property. But I can't with that building. I can't sit there and say that because you're a squatter, you have that right. I think there should be some kind of middle ground. Like I said, you know, maybe landlords shouldn't let their beautiful properties go to shit. Maybe they should take better care of it, especially historical stuff, which is like a damn shame because we don't have a lot of that left.
So basically, the house behind me has been renovated, and hopefully we won't have any more squatters living in there. But time will only tell. The house is redone, looks great, but if it stays empty, who knows what might happen.
Possibilities of what I could do with the world at my fingertips. My imagination brings a smile up to my lips.